Today I am joined by conductor and composer Daniela Candillari. Daniela has appeared at many important opera houses and concert halls, including LA Opera, New York Philharmonic, Opera Philadelphia, Cincinnati Opera, and the Prototype Festival. Daniela shares how she's been staying connected to her creativity during the pandemic, specifically with a newfound love of pottery and gardening, and the surprising truths that she has learned about herself and her musicality during this time. Daniela reflects on her experience of performance anxiety and why memories of her time living through the wars in former Yugoslavia have returned to her during the pandemic. Hi, Daniela.
Hi, Julia.
How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Who's
So this
this?
is this is Kikiriki. It means peanut in Serbian.
So I'd just love to hear kind of how this time has been for you.
This year, I think, was really unexpected in many, many ways. I think all of us were sort of taken by surprise when the pandemic hit and when suddenly our work was gone. I had connected my identity so much to my work
Yeah.
that once all of that was gone, I felt like, who am I suddenly? If I can't make music, who am I? And what do I bring to this world? If I can't do this, how else can I express myself? I talked to my sister about this because I was, upset and sad. And I think like everyone else, she asked me, well, what do you want? Do you want to just work like the whole time? And now I can laugh at that because it's such an extreme description of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like, yeah, I want to work, but I don't want to work all the time.
Right.
But I think the biggest difference for artists and musicians and athletes is that what we do since early age inherently ends up becoming who we are.
Yeah.
I think it really shapes us to be the people that we become, and sort of taking that off, taking that coat off from
Yeah.
us really feels like naked and vulnerable
Yeah.
and unknown.
Right.
As somebody who likes to be organized and likes to sort of have the answers before I've asked the questions already,
Mm-hmm.
I started seeing this time of shutdown, which we spent in Michigan. I started seeing it as sort of like blessing in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can catch up on sleep. I remember that there was a week in January when I was working on two different productions at the same time. I was rehearsing three times a day in three different locations. And I caught myself on the A train going to my first rehearsal,
Mm-hmm.
sort of not remembering, is like, do I exit now at Lincoln Center or do I
Yeah.
continue down to Wall Street? It was wild.
Yeah.
And so when this sort of lockdown happened, I thought, well, this is going to be okay,
Right.
because I'll catch up on sleep. I can catch up on some work. I can start preparing the other program that I have to do. And for about first 6 weeks, I was incredibly productive, surprisingly. But then one after another production kept on getting canceled and or postponed, and about 6 weeks of sort of not seeing the end to this, I hit the wall. And I
Okay.
thought, I mean, what am I doing? Why am I preparing these pieces that now are going to be postponed? They
Mm-hmm.
may never get performed again.
Mm-hmm.
I just had no idea. And I actually allowed myself to go to the grieving process of work lost, of identity lost,
Mm-hmm.
and then slowly came back out of that. And what has been really helpful here in Michigan specifically, my husband and I have a small cabin, and it has this beautiful garden in the back that has not been attended to at all. And I thought, well, I'm going to devote myself to gardening. I'm going to do something that I've never done before. And gardening has been incredible. It just offered a really sort of meditative practice
Mm-hmm.
every day, and it also offered a way to participate in a process. Through all of this, what I think has been the hardest challenge or the hardest question to answer is this idea that there is no deadline,
Yes.
that we
Yeah.
know how long this is going to go. And so going through that process where you think in 3 weeks I can see this thing sprout on, I can sort of like tend to my own garden. It that was really refreshing. It was a very different pace than what I'm used to in life. Um, but it was really a refuge and a sort of happy hobby, like something that just brought me joy every single day. And then slowly I started delving, is that the word, into pottery.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
Delving,
yes,
yes.
there's a fantastic potter here in town, Peter Johnson. I stopped by this year and I said, just like, do you offer lessons? And so I've been taking lessons with him now. It sort of like really started opening my eyes to different thoughts or ideas in music
Mm.
that I'm connotating with the art of making something.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what I think has been really satisfying is having this idea of participating in a process that you can actually see go through an end. It's very fulfilling being able to make something that within 15 minutes you can say this might work or this may not work.
Yes.
And you can start from scratch or you can try and fix it and then see wherever that takes you.
I understand. I mean, something that I've been enjoying with the podcast too is that it's something that can be done in a day. It's
Right.
you can see it from beginning to end, and you have
Right.
this product, and then
Right.
you can share it. And
Right.
you have been sharing your photos of your
My pottery, yeah.
which I've
Yeah.
loved.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been really fun. But I was thinking about the exactly what you said, that you're working through a product and you can deliver it. And I work mainly in opera, and our production periods are usually 5, 6 weeks long when gearing up to the premiere. But of course,
Yes.
there is, with newer works, there is the process of the workshop, but there is the finish line that you have to get to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of right now, that finish line can, happen tomorrow. It can happen in 6 months, and just the sort of instability of time. It has taught me a lot about myself and about my work and relationships and so on.
I'd love to hear what you learned from pottery about music making.
Oh my God. Working on the sculptures, just the play of balance in things, the shapes that, for instance, you can see that might work, may not work. I actually think a lot about the work of composers, of how you choose an idea, how you develop it. Peter is also a really strong classical music fan, and it's been great because he has the Blue Lake Arts radio playing on all the time. It's been sort of like this marriage of listening to classical music, something that I'm very familiar with,
Right.
and doing pottery, something that I'm not familiar with at all, and that I'm just learning. It's sort of like trying to also see how music inspires me in the moment when I'm working on something, sort of what that evokes, what emotion that is. Sort of like finding if there's any movement in the pottery that I detect in music or vice versa. The biggest sort of lesson with pottery has been there's this great moment. So centering is, I find, the hardest thing for possibly everyone. Sort of learning how to center clay and learning when it's right.
Well, it's spinning, right? Is that what you
Exactly,
mean?
exactly.
Okay, yeah.
It's
Okay.
spinning, and when you need to sort of center clay before
Yeah.
you start opening it and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Learning that idea about centering and what it needs to feel like, and how much actually there is a trust and control balance between the two,
Oh, yeah.
has been incredible. And I often think about that in, reflecting back on rehearsals of how much is my job of sort of controlling a piece and letting musicians and music speak, of sort of finding that perfect balance where you can step outside and just let everybody do what they're doing, and you can navigate that a little bit, and then pieces that really need focus and attention, and finding that balance in a really organic way. He talks about this moment of controlling the clay enough that it goes where it needs to go, but also letting room that it can breathe,
Yeah.
so that you're not controlling everything. And I think, for conductors, we we should have the answers to the piece, and we have the biggest overview of the piece, and we have our idea how it is. But I think there's also an incredible beauty in sort of letting the piece go and relinquishing your ideas for sort of the idea of this ensemble, of this hall, of this space, of what this piece means right now.
And you're a composer too. I mean, I imagine that it sounds analogous to the writing process as well.
I think so. I am the type of person who wants to like know what I'm going to write and how this piece should look,
Yeah.
and feel.
One of the hardest parts of writing, I think, is accepting that you don't know where the piece is going to go and actually letting it kind of talk back to you.
Right. I agree. I think there's that element of play that was perhaps missing in me inside. And so sort of learning these skills in a different level has somehow opened up the channels to think about things differently and to consider some different strategies, perhaps. I've been asking myself this whole time, how can I also grow as a musician and as a person, and sort of noticing how much I need of specificity in my life and how much I need of playtime and sort of loose time has been incredibly useful to get to know that side of myself, which, I haven't really had in the past.
So the loose playtime is newer for you.
The loose playtime is newer. Yeah. It's there's this actually fantastic book by Srini Pillai. He has this book that's called Tinker, Dabble, Doodle, Try. And it's awesome. So he talks about this idea that hard work and sort of like pushing ourselves to our limits is not always the best thing for us. Right. That we have to find time in our day to just like step aside and play and do a puzzle and let our sort of like brain rewire itself, that the resting period is as important as the working period.
Yeah.
I'm definitely one of those people that works until exhaustion, and then then like I need a day or two
right.
to recoup myself. So this hopefully has taught me not to do that ever again in my life.
Ever again? That's amazing.
Yeah, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's fascinating how once you get a taste of that, like you don't want to go back. I feel that way. Like, I don't know. I never want to stay up all night writing again.
You know, when I'm conducting and when I'm on the road, initially I thought, oh, I can do both. I can, be in rehearsal period for 6 hours every day, and then I can come back home and write for like 2 hours. That never works. It does not work for me. So again, when things started shutting down, my first sort of place of rescue in a way and refuge was, I'm going to write all of these pieces that I've been putting off because I've been busy with other stuff. And then again, you start asking your questions, well, what's the deadline? And I don't have a deadline, so do I need to do this today, or can I come back to it when I actually feel more centered and when I feel that I'm saying something rather than just putting notes on a paper.
So how have you been kind of reimagining your day?
I actually have a semi-structured day right now, as sort of organized and almost OCD as I was in the beginning, of really timing, my yoga practice from, 3 p.m. until 4 p.m. And being really rigid with those time constraints.
Yes.
Now I've become a little bit looser in just sort of reminding myself what my daily routine is, which includes yoga, meditation, and reading, and learning a language. So at some point I have to go through all of these 4. In what succession they happen does not matter. So it gives me a little bit more room to breathe in a way. And then I mark in my calendar, this is a time when I want to study. But what I study, I literally choose on the day of, because right now, again, I'm not under any sort of
Right.
push or time limit
Yes.
where I have to say, well, in a week I need to know this piece.
Right.
So there's that flexibility and that luxury of time.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to ask you actually, if you've been able to write during this time, or is it something that's been hard?
It's been hard for me to be writing.
Yeah.
But I have been doing it more.
Mm-hmm.
I just sort of have come to accept that it just takes a little bit longer, and I do a little bit less each day.
Right.
Than in normal times.
Right. I think that sort of realization of, or these conversations that we're having now with ourselves of what is normal and, what I can sort of push off until tomorrow and come back to it. I think that has been sort of life-changing for me because, again, since I was, 6, I was in music, and there was constant drive to do this and to do that. And there was sort of this like schedule that I at least followed, this like regime rudimentary that was just like, you have to do this, you have to do that, and so on. And right now I find that actually when I do study music, when I do listen to music, that I actually hear things differently. And I see things that I haven't seen before. I hear things that I haven't heard before. So I think that in regular life, whatever that happens, that I think we need to remind ourselves that of the things that we learned this year and how they enriched our lives actually. And not, it's tragic what's happening everywhere. It's unprecedented, which we all know. I'm still training myself to somehow trust the process, to trust that I personally need to go through this. Maybe that all of us need to go through this.
Yeah.
And, I'm fortunate enough that we could come and hang out in Michigan with my husband's mom and his family. I know not a lot of people have that luxury, but sort of thinking about that, I think maybe something this year had to happen in order to remind me of the space that I need, the practices that I need to continue. I think that self-reflection time is incredibly important for all of us. If we want to grow, if we want to learn new things, if we want to keep on educating ourselves, I think that quiet time just needs to happen. Now, this year, we got more of it than we ever hoped for.
We ever
but
want again.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you are listening to music differently now? And why is that?
When you sort of work towards a goal of performing, I don't think there's always a resting period that's allowed.
Right.
What ends up happening to me every single time I'm in production, in about week 2, I will stop sleeping, and my sleep schedule gets so messed up. If I get 3-4 hours of sleep at night, that's amazing. And that happens because I literally catch myself at night thinking about every single phrase and thinking like, oh, what is this phrase saying? What is this phrase doing? Where do I want it to go? Where does it show up again? And those are obviously conversations that I have during the day with, conscious mind.
Right.
But then there's something about the rest period where the brain keeps on working without me really wanting it to do that. And then I sort of gear myself towards this performance. I tend to learn pieces almost by memory by the time we're performing.
Wow.
Again, no matter how complicated they are, there's a very strong memory. But then I also sort of forget it after a week, I move on to the next piece, and then I'm just like, okay, what did I do last week? I don't remember. And so I really think that the quiet time now has actually allowed my brain to retain the information much better. And because of that, to hear things differently. But one question that I keep on asking myself is, what will that first rehearsal back with people really feel like? What will that be like?
I know.
And there was, we were listening to Swan Lake the other day, and with the beautiful cello solo, I just started weeping. I mean, I had no idea where that came from, but it was just, downpour. But I also do always wonder, when we're back working in a known environment, what will that be like? And I'm quite excited about it.
Me too. In the sort of midst of your incredibly busy schedule, which sounds like it started in childhood, potentially. um, when did you start to develop like a self-care practice or implement that into your life?
So both my mom and my dad were actually athletes,
Oh.
and the idea of mental work and mental preparation was sort of around me from an early age. I didn't really know what it meant until I had to go through the process of learning how to meditate. And that happened when I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
No, 14. I started out as a pianist and I had the most horrible performance experience where whatever happened, whatever the trigger was, for that one performance, I just could not collect myself. I could not collect my nerves. I could not sort of like think clearly. Nothing was making sense. I mean, it literally felt like my body and my brain were on a different level than where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite, it was a really uncomfortable feeling actually. And I was talking to my piano teacher at the time, and she recommended that I seek out a counselor at our music school and start talking to him about that. And so he started working with me, and he introduced me to the very, very simple sort of meditative practice that then I started doing every day. And in talking to my mom, she said that mental practice was always part of their routine. No matter what, they would dedicate 30 minutes every day to sort of going through a routine of mental practice. So meditation essentially started being part of my life since I was 14. It helped me a lot with my performance anxiety that I had initially. Yeah. And you know, when I think back, it's so like, we don't know these things when they happen, but when I thought about why did I suddenly get to have performance anxiety when I was 14, when, you know, for 7-8 years before that, I was functioning perfectly. I remember there was a trigger that a girl that was like performing before me asked me, "Oh, are you not nervous?" Yeah. And I was like, "No, I'm not. So if I'm not, is there something wrong? Like, should I be nervous?" So it was incredible to, you know, now looking back to think that like how we think that being nervous is okay. And of course, being nervous in a way is okay because it obviously shows that you care about something. But if it's like, it should never be this limiting fear. It should never be something that limits you from expression.
I'm kind of curious, just, you know, you're a conductor and you kind of work in the medium of time and how time moves. People feel like time has been completely warped. I feel like time moves really quickly and then it moves very, very slowly. And that it can kind of do both of those things in a given day, which is exhausting. I'm just curious, have you had any sort of new observations about time during this period?
I think human emotions sometimes still does not let you be neutral in time. I think this idea of how we perceive time really goes to sort of the inside of ourselves. And I found myself when I enjoy stuff, when I'm doing something where I'm completely engrossed and engaged in, time flies by. I always think of my first rehearsal ever that I run with a choir, and going into that rehearsal, I was incredibly nervous, thinking like, "Oh, am I ready enough? You know, what if I have nothing to say? What if they are perfect already? Like, what am I going to bring to the table?" And I found that process so incredibly satisfying of going through a rehearsal, of being there, of making music, that what I literally thought felt like 5 minutes ended up being 3 hours of rehearsal. And so now that we need to look for stimulus outside of our known parameters, time is definitely very, very different. You know, we need to show up and do some work. It may not be the work that we want to do right now, or it may not be work that we ever thought we would need to do, but just showing up and doing that and sort of applying ourselves to something, I think regains that element of confidence and expression and finding yourself again in almost in losing yourself in one way, finding yourself in who you are back through something different. I also think I went through this conversation with many of my friends of finding value in different things in our lives, and how or how little value we've been giving to certain aspects.
Right.
I'm not from United States. I immigrated here 8 years ago. And one really big downfall of this year was the fact that I wasn't able to see my sister.
Yeah.
She lives in Serbia. My mom lives in Slovenia. My mom was able to come and visit, and I was able to see her, but I have not seen my sister in more than a year. And I knew that was important. I did not know how much I have to make that a priority in my life, to spend time with my family, to sort of figure out whatever I need to do to go back to Serbia to visit my sister and to visit my mom in Slovenia. When everything started shutting down in March, I was talking to my mom and I was asking her, well, how are you dealing with this? And have you experienced anything like this in your life in the past? And bear in mind, my dad was born in 41. So like just as the Second World War was starting, sorry.
Yeah.
And then all of my family lived through the war in the 90s that we had in Yugoslavia. So essentially, in my family, there was at least one person who saw 2 wars. And so I asked my mom, have you ever been through anything like this? She said in the 70s, I think 72, there was an outbreak of smallpox that was really, really deadly. It sort of like decimated the people of Yugoslavia. But they closed the country down for about a month until that got under control. And she said she just remembers sort of that episode in her life. Yeah, but nobody expected this to go on this long, even, yeah, nothing could have prepared any of us for this.
Do you have certain memories of your time in the 90s that feel reminiscent of sort of the chaos we feel today?
A little bit. I actually moved with my mom to Slovenia in the 90s. And there was a period because of the war. Slovenia had a civil war that lasted about 10 days. And then they secluded themselves from Yugoslavia. And then the war kept on sort of raging, mainly in Bosnia, but it involved Croatia and Serbia. There was a period, for instance, when the borders with Serbia were closed and all of my family was back in Serbia. My dad and my sister and all of my grandmothers, aunts and uncles and so on. And I just had no idea when was the next time that I would be able to see them. Yeah. So it took about 4 years for me and my sister to visit each other again.
Wow.
And it was brutal. I just think nobody should ever go through that. Nobody should ever not being able to see their parents or their family or their brother or sister. I mean, that is just sort of out of question. But that uncertainty of, will it be possible to travel? Will it not be possible to travel? What are the risks? What if the border closes down again? And it was just, it sort of like seems unreal in a way.
Yeah.
It literally like looks like a really dark movie that you do not want to participate in.
Right.
And then, in 99, the bombing happened of Serbia. All of my family was basically affected by it. And again, they couldn't come stay with us. We couldn't go visit them. I remember it was April 1st, which is my sister's birthday. And I was listening to the radio in Slovenia, and they said that the bombs had fallen on the bridge that was 500 meters away from my grandma's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thought that you have is just like, is that area okay? Is my family okay? What is happening? And of course, before you see it, you don't really know. So, I mean, we got out of that. I hope, we get out of this. I strongly believe that every sort of tragedy that happens or every bad thing that happens that can teach us something better. So I do think that the year of 2020 is a year of great lessons. of that we continue in life and that we implement in our lives wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
this, being so open and honest about your experience during this time.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me and for having these conversations.
So, if listeners want to find you or hear your work, where should they go?
My website, www.danielacandillari.com, is the best place. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, but all of those are linked in the website.
Great.
So, yeah.
I think Daniela's story is a wonderful reminder that you never know when a new activity that you take on just on a whim for fun can really teach you something about yourself and about what you love and what matters most to you, and can even give you insight into your creativity. I think it's so inspiring that Daniela has this view that even in the most difficult circumstances, we can find ways to connect with ourselves and to even grow and transform. I think it does take time to understand yourself and figure out what you want and need, and that time is worth it. So thank you, Daniela, for joining us, and thank you for listening.